Good morning, boys and girls. We are on to the second chapter in Front Desk. All right, I think we're going to get two chapters in today, chapter 2 and 3. So, where we left off, they made a deal that they could stay at the hotel and they would make $5 per customer. So, they think they're pretty psyched about this situation. All right, let's see where it goes from here. The Cavista Motel sat on the corner of Coast Boulevard and Meadow Lane. It was a small motel, the first of three motels in a row. The Topaz Inn and the Lagoon Motel were right next door and bigger. But I immediately decided I liked our little motel the best. With its creamy walls and red doors, it looked warm and inviting. I looked up at the sign and read the words, "Low rates, cable TV, Disneyland, just 5 miles away." Excitedly, I asked my parents if that meant we could visit and go on all the rides. "We probably could," my mom said. I smiled, savoring the moment. Our lives were about to change. We were going to become Disneyland going people. As if things couldn't get any better, the Cavista had a pool. It was right out in front. The water sparkled under the golden sun. I closed my eyes and pictured myself doing cannonballs in the water all summer long. This was going to be amazing. Just behind the pool was the front office. I'd asked my parents in the car whether I could help out at the front desk. My dad had chuckled and said, we'll see. Mr. Yao was waiting for us in the front office. He buzzed us in and lifted the divider so we could all get behind the front desk. The front desk was a long wooden front desk, that stretched almost the entire width of the room. Just behind the front office were the main manager's quarters where Mr. Yao led us next. There was a living room with a bed next to it. He pointed to the bed. "You guys sleep here," he said to my parents, "so you can hear the customers in the middle of the night." "Customers come in the middle of the night?" my dad asked. Mr. Yao nodded. "Of course, it's a motel. But won't they wake them up?" "That wake them up?" I asked. Mr. Yao rolled his eyes. "That's the point," he said. Next, he led us over to the small bedroom just to the right of the living room and the kitchen. "The girl can sleep here," Mr. Yao said. For some reason, he still kept calling me the girl, even though I had already told him my name several times. I put my stuff down in the small bedroom, then joined my parents and Mr. Yao in the front office. Mr. Yao was explaining the buzzer. "One wrong buzz and it's all over," he said. "See that glass?" He pointed to the thick glass enclosing the front office. "That's bulletproof glass. You see a bad guy come up? You don't need to worry. They can't hurt you. But if you press this buzzer," he put his fingers on the buzzer just under the front desk, and a loud buzz roared. "The door right there gets unlocked," Mr. Yao said. "And then what?" I asked him. "Then he's inside," Mr. Yao said. I looked around to see if there was any magical buttons or bulletproof glass inside the office. There weren't. I asked Mr. Yao how we could tell if someone was a bad guy. "Based on how they looked, of course," he said, which made me wonder, because it's not like bad people walked around with a sticker on their heads that said, "I'm bad." "The bottom line is, don't let in any bad guys," Mr. Yao warned. His pupils expanded as he said, "bad." While Mr. Yao took my parents out back to show them the laundry room and cleaning supplies, I stayed in the front office. I climbed up on top of the front desk stool. Gently, I reached down and touched the buzzer with my finger. It was greasy, like it had been pressed hundreds of times. Slowly, I pressed on it and heard the tap, tap. I pressed it again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Power coursed through my fingertips. I closed my eyes and pictured myself checking customers in. "Why, yes, Mrs. Connolly, I'd be glad to show you your room. Right this way," I'd say. "Certainly I can help with your luggage. It would be my pleasure." So deep was I in my fake customer relations that I almost didn't hear it was a real customer walked up and tapped on the front office glass. I looked up to see a thin African American man, about 50 or so years old, smiling and waving at me. He motioned with his hand for me to buzz him in. "Oh, right," I said, then pressed on the buzzer. Buzz. He pushed when the door and walked in. Just saw Mr. Yao in the lot. You must be the new managers, he said. He extended his hand across the desk. My name is Hank. I smiled, took his hand, and shook it. I'm Mia. Nice to meet you. He tilted his head to one side. How are you, Mia? How old are you, Mia? I'm 10, I told him. Say, aren't you a little young to be running this place? He teased me. I laughed. I liked Hank already. I'm helping my parents, I told him. What about you? Do you live here? Sure do, he said, pointing to one of the rooms. That's me, right there, number 12. Hank informed him that he wasn't a regular customer, the kind who stays just a day or two. He was a weekly. A weekly is someone who pays by the week. There were 5 of them at the Cavista. They were Mrs. Q, Mrs. T, Hank, Billy Bob, and Fred. You'll meet them, he said. They're all nice people. I smiled. Do you guys like living here? I asked. Oh, yeah, he said. Well, except for Mr. Yao. Everyone hates Mr. Yao. Really? I asked him. He seems all right. Intense, but all right. Hank snorted. Trust me, he's anything but all right. Before I could ask Hank what he meant by that, the back door creaked open and my parents and Mr. Yao came back in. When I turned around, Hank was gone. Oh boy. I wonder what's up with Mr. Yao. All right. Maybe we'll find out in chapter 3. Here we go. Sign here on the dotted line, Mr. Yao said to my parents, presenting them with an enormous employment contract, 6 pages long. Uh-oh. My parents beamed as they proudly signed their names. Mr. Yao took the signed employment contract and stuffed it into his bag. Thank you so much, Mr. Yao, for giving us this opportunity, my father said. You don't know how much it means to us. He got choked up as he said the words. We promise we'll take good care of your hotel. Your motel, my mom added. We won't let you down. Mr. Yao nodded and held up the manager's keys to the motel. As my parents reached for the keys, he held them out, just out of reach. Everything happens in this motel is your responsibility. You understand? He asked. Something breaks, you have to pay for it. My parents nodded. Under no circumstances are you ever to leave the motel unattended. Ever. One of you must always stay behind. Again, my parents nodded eagerly, even though I was thinking, wait, what? I can't go without both my parents at the same time, but what about Disneyland? But it was condition number 3 that really made my jaw drop. Mr. Yao turned to me. You can't use the pool, kid, he said. Why not? I said. If you use the pool, then all the customers will want to use the pool. So? So think of all the water and towels they'll be wasting, he said. It's not good for the environment. I frowned at him. Somehow I doubted this was about the environment. She understands. You won't use the pool, will you, Mia? My mother shook her head at me. I glanced at my mom and the desperation in her eyes. Oh, okay, I said. Good, Mr. Yao grinned. Satisfied, he tossed my parents the keys. That night, the sweat smells of jasmine tea filled the front office. My parents only ever got the jasmine tea for our special occasions. We had packed a small tin of it before we left China, and every time something good happened, my mom would take out a few leaves and make some tea. I guess not a lot of good things had happened because there's still quite a lot of it left. But all that was about to change. Tonight, my parents poured generously from the tin. The calming aroma brought me back to my grandfather's house, all of us crowded around the table. At these big family dinners, my cousin, Shen, and I would giggle and interrupt each other as we talked. I felt an ache in my tummy, razor sharp, at the thought of Shen. I still remember the day I left. I could see Shen's face pressed up against the glass by the security gate at the airport, blinking furiously, like he was trying hard not to cry. I was too. On the plane ride over, they gave us little packets of butter for our bread. Butter was very expensive in China, so I asked for extras to put in my pocket. I saved them for Shen for months in the fridge until it finally sank in that we weren't going back. So I ate them. My mother's voice jerked me back into reality. Hey, Mia, look here. Look at me, she said, smiling. Huh? I looked up to see my mother couching in front of the front desk, holding her hands up like she was going to take a picture. It's this thing she does. My mom says it's important to take pictures of the nice moments in life, even if it's just in your head. As my mom pressed down on the pretend camera, my dad and I sat up straight and gave her our best smiles. Eggplant, she said in Chinese, and I giggled because even though that's what people in China said whenever someone took pictures, it was funny hearing it in America. As my parents unpacked, I slipped out of the back to find Hank. I brought him a cup of jasmine tea. Now that we were making 150 a day, surely we could afford to buy some more. I hadn't seen a Chinese supermarket on the way over here. Hank's room was in the back, beside the laundry room. There was a pot of cherry tomato plants in front of his room. I knocked on the door. Hank answered on the first knock. His eyebrows shot up when he saw the tea. That's for me? He exclaimed. I smiled and handed it to him. It's from China, I told him. Get out of here. The guy next door opened his door to see what was going on. He was a white guy, about the same age as Hank. He wore an Hawaiian shirt, and he had a small tattoo of a sailboat on his arm. The smell of popcorn drifted from his room. Billy Bob, Hank said. Meet Mia. She's the new manager. And look, she brought me some tea from China. Good to meet you, Mia, Billy Bob said, extending a hand. I shook it. Pleasure's all mine, I said. Billy Bob smiled. Say, you're a lot nicer than that old manager. The last manager treated us like second-class citizens, Hank added. Really? I asked. Hank nodded, carefully lifted the cup to his lips, and took a sip. That's good stuff. Hank turned to Billy Bob. You've got to try this. More doors opened, and soon all the weeklies were outside, talking and sipping the tea under the glowing crescent. Like Billy Bob, they were white too. Mrs. Q had long wavy hair that ran all the way down her back. Fred had a big belly and shook when he laughed. And Mrs. T had glittery cat eyes, reading glasses that she wore on the tip of her nose like this. Hank was right. They were all very nice. The weeklies asked if I would join them for a game of Monopoly, but it was getting late and I needed to help my parents unpack. I bid them all good night and was about to go back to the manager's quarters when I suddenly remembered. Hey, Hank, what do you mean by what you said earlier about Mr. Yao? I asked. That he was anything but all right. Hank's jaw locked. You'll find out soon, kid, Hank said. The man has coal for a heart. Chapter 4. Wonder what that could mean. Maybe make some predictions in your head. This is always a good time to maybe take a post-it. Right? What do you think that means? Why? What do you think Mr. Yao might be? What's the deal? Why isn't he nice? All right. Until next time, boys and girls.